HOA Karen thought I would cover for her son after he drove into my fence instead. The cops made sure his car was taken away. I never thought my quiet night would end with flashing lights on my lawn. I never thought a broken fence would turn into a war with the most feared woman in our neighborhood. But when Karen's son smashed his car into my yard, and she told the cops that I should pay, that's when I realized this wasn't about a fence. It was about power, rules, and secrets buried deep inside our perfect little street. And what happened next changed everything. Welcome back to HOA Secrets Uncovered, where the perfect lawns hide the darkest stories. My name is David. I live in a small suburban neighborhood where every mailbox has to match, every lawn has to shine, and every move you make is watched by the HOA. I work from home as a freelance contractor, and I thought I had seen it all, until the night Karen's son crashed into my fence and dragged me into the ugliest fight I've ever faced. I still remember that night like it was carved into the wood of my broken fence. The air was quiet, too quiet, only the sound of crickets and the low hum of streetlights buzzing against the dark sky. I was sitting inside, half asleep, a cup of cold coffee by my side, when it happened. A crash so loud it shook the walls. Glass breaking, metal twisting, wood snapping like bones in a fire. For a moment, I thought it was an earthquake. But then I heard the engine still running, wheels spinning in the dirt, and my stomach sank. I opened the door fast, stepped into the night air, and there it was. My fence, destroyed. My flowers, crushed under the weight of a car. And that car, sitting right in my yard, headlights cutting through the smoke of broken wood. The driver's door swung open, and out stumbled a figure. I knew that walk. I knew that smirk before I even saw his face. It was Karen's son, Karen, the queen of the HOA. The woman who fined me once because my trash bin was 2 inches too far from the curb. The same woman who sent letters about my grass being slightly uneven. And now, her son stood there, on my lawn, with my fence in ruins behind him. He brushed the dust from his hoodie like nothing happened, looked at me, and grinned, like this was some kind of joke. I could feel my chest getting tight. But before I could even speak, he muttered, "Guess you'll have to fix that, huh?" I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But all that came out was silence. Because deep down, I knew who would show up next. And I wasn't wrong. Karen came marching down the street in her robe, her hair tied back like she had been waiting for this moment all her life. Her sandals slapped against the pavement. Click, clack, click. She didn't even look at me at first. Her eyes went straight to the broken fence, and then to her son, and then to me. The smirk on her face was colder than the night air. She didn't say sorry. She didn't ask if I was okay. Instead, she tilted her head and said, "Well, your fence shouldn't have been so close to the road." I thought I misheard her, but she stepped closer, her voice louder now. "This is actually your fault. You know, his car hit because you put your fence too far out. You'll have to cover the damages." My hands curled into fists. I could feel the heat in my face. I had lived here for years, every inch of my yard approved by the HOA, every nail measured, every line checked. And here she was, trying to turn her son's mistake into my crime. I wanted to argue, but her son leaned back on the hood of his car, smirking like a prince who thought the world belonged to him, like he knew his mother's power would protect him. And that's when I noticed. The curtains in the houses around us moving, neighbors peeking out, silent witnesses. no one daring to step outside, because everyone knew crossing Karen meant trouble. I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't just about a broken fence anymore. This was about power, about control, and about the one family everyone feared. Karen pulled out her phone, her voice dripping with fake innocence as she called the police. "Oh, yes, officer. There's been an accident. My son, poor thing. He was driving carefully, but the fence was out of line. Yes, you'll see." I stood there frozen, listening to her twist the truth like it was clay in her hands. And all I could think was, would the police actually believe her? The sound of sirens grew closer, red and blue lights bouncing off the windows of the houses. Shadows danced across the broken wood of my fence. Karen smiled. Her son laughed. And I stood still. The squad car stopped at the curb. An officer stepped out, his flashlight cutting through the night as he scanned the yard, the fence, the car. He walked slow, calm, and when his eyes landed on me, I felt something shift in the air. Karen rushed forward before I could speak, her voice spilling out fast. "Officer, this man's fence was out of line. My son barely tapped it, and now he's accusing us. It's unfair. It's against the HOA guidelines. He should pay for the damages." I opened my mouth to protest, but the officer raised a hand, and in that silence, his flashlight drifted back to her son, who swayed slightly, his breath heavy, his eyes red. The officer stepped closer to him, and for the first time, the smirk on his face cracked. The smell of alcohol floated in the air, sharp and undeniable. The officer's jaw tightened. Karen's smile faded. Her eyes darted to the officer, to her son, back to me. Her power, slipping like sand through her fingers. The night was no longer quiet. The neighbors pressed closer to their windows, holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. And so did I. Because in that moment, under those flashing lights, I realized this wasn't just about a fence anymore. This was about truth versus lies, power versus justice. And one question burned in my mind as I stood there in the cold night. What do you think? Will the officer believe Karen's lies? Or will her son finally face the truth he's been running from? The officer's eyes stayed locked on Karen's son. The silence was heavy. So heavy I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. But before the officer could speak, my mind drifted for a second, back to the world we lived in. A world painted with perfect lawns and perfect smiles. A world that looked beautiful from the outside, but was rotten in the shadows. Our neighborhood was the kind of place where you couldn't leave your trash bin out a minute late, where your grass had to be green enough to blind you in the sunlight, where every holiday decoration needed approval, and where Karen ruled it all. She wasn't just a neighbor. She was the HOA president, the queen who sat on her throne of bylaws and fines, the woman who could destroy you with a letter in your mailbox, and her son. He grew up in that shadow, protected by her rules, by her power, never punished, never corrected. A spoiled prince in a kingdom of fear. I'd seen it before. The way neighbors bowed their heads when she passed. The way they whispered complaints but never said them out loud. The way she twisted small mistakes into crimes. She was the kind of woman who could tell you your roses were too red and fine you for disturbing the harmony of the street. And now, that same woman stood in front of me, demanding I pay for the fence her son had destroyed, like the rules she created only applied when they served her. The officer finally broke the silence, his voice low, steady. "Ma'am, I need your son's license and registration." Karen's lips tightened. She forced a laugh. "Oh, officer, that won't be necessary. This was just a silly accident. Really, the fence is the problem here, not my boy." But the officer didn't move. He didn't smile. His hand stayed out, waiting. Her son shifted uneasily, patting his pockets. His smirk gone now, replaced by a flicker of panic. He fumbled with his wallet, dropping it once, muttering under his breath. Finally, he pulled out his license, his hand shaking slightly as he handed it over. The officer studied it under the glow of the flashlight, his eyes sharp, his face unreadable. Then he asked the question that made Karen's face turn pale. "Have you been drinking tonight, son?" The street seemed to freeze in that moment. Every curtain pulled tighter, every neighbor holding their breath. Even the night air seemed to stop moving. Karen stepped forward quickly, her voice rising. "Of course not. Don't be ridiculous. He's just tired. He was driving home after a long day. Isn't that right, honey?" Her son nodded weakly, his lips pressed tight. But the smell told a different story. That sharp sting of alcohol lingered in the cold air, impossible to hide. The officer leaned closer, his flashlight steady on the young man's face. The boy blinked against the light, swayed just a little, his breath unsteady. And I knew then. The fence was only the beginning. Karen's eyes darted between me, the officer, and her son. Her confidence cracked, her voice no longer calm, but desperate. "You don't understand. He didn't mean to. This man's fence was illegal. The HOA will confirm it. He's at fault, not us. Please, officer, you need to listen." Her words tumbled over each other, fast, frantic. But the officer wasn't listening to her anymore. His gaze was locked on the boy. And the boy looked smaller now, weaker. Like the crown his mother gave him had finally slipped from his head. I should have felt relief. I should have felt victory. But instead, a cold chill ran down my spine, because I realized this fight wasn't going to end here. Karen wasn't the kind of woman to surrender. Even with the truth staring her in the face. Even with the flashing lights of the squad car painting her lies in red and blue. She would find a way to twist this. She would find a way to make me the villain. The officer's radio crackled, breaking the silence. He stepped aside, speaking into it, his voice calm, controlled. Karen crossed her arms, tapping her foot against the pavement, glaring at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. Her son rubbed his temples, leaning against the car, his hands trembling. The neighbors kept watching, hidden shadows behind the curtains. None of them brave enough to step outside, because they all knew, if they got involved, they'd be next on Karen's list. And as I stood there, under those flashing lights, surrounded by silence and judgment, I felt something change inside me. For years, I had played by the rules. I had trimmed my grass, measured my mailbox, painted my fence the approved shade of white. I had done everything the HOA demanded. And still, they came for me. Still, they tried to break me. That night, staring at Karen and her broken empire, I knew I was done being afraid. I was done being silent. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to fight back. The officer turned back toward us, his face unreadable under the beam of his flashlight. Karen's lips tightened again, her chin raised, as if preparing for battle. Her son swallowed hard, his eyes darting between us like a trapped animal, and I stood there, waiting for the words that would decide everything. But before the officer spoke, a question rose in my mind, a question I couldn't ignore, and one I want to ask you now. If you were standing there that night, watching Karen twist the truth, watching her son shake under the officer's light, would you stay silent? Or would you finally speak up against the most feared woman on the street? The officer's eyes cut through the dark like blades of glass. His flashlight moved slow across the car, the broken fence, and then back to me. The silence was heavy again, thick enough to choke on. Karen shifted beside me, her arms crossed tight, her jaw stiff. Her son stood against the car, shoulders hunched, breathing shallow, and I could feel it. The storm was about to break. The officer finally spoke. "Sir, step away from the vehicle." Karen's face twisted. Her hand shot out as if she could shield her son with nothing but sheer will. "No, wait. This isn't necessary. He didn't do anything wrong. This man is lying. His fence was out of line, officer. I've told you already." Her voice was sharp, desperate. But the officer didn't even glance at her. His eyes stayed on the boy. And for the first time, I saw Karen's power slip away. Her son hesitated, his hands twitching at his sides. He looked at me, then at his mother, then at the officer. And finally, he stepped forward, slow, like a child caught sneaking out after dark. The officer studied him carefully, his voice calm but heavy with warning. "Have you been drinking tonight?" The boy's lips trembled. Karen jumped in again, her words tumbling out fast. "He has not. He was just tired, that's all. He works so hard. Don't accuse him like this, officer. You don't know him." But I knew the truth. The smell in the air was too strong. The boy's eyes too glassy. His steps too uneven. He didn't have to answer. The night had already spoken for him. The officer stepped closer, his flashlight steady on the young man's face. "Open your mouth, son. Breathe," Karen gasped. "This is harassment. This is illegal. You can't just—" But her words died in the air when the officer gave her a single look. Cold, sharp, final. Her son obeyed. And as the officer leaned closer, his nose crinkled slightly. He didn't say it out loud yet, but the truth was written in his eyes. Karen saw it too. And for the first time since I'd known her, she faltered. Her lips parted. Her confidence cracked. But only for a second. She straightened, her chin high again, her voice sharp like broken glass. "Officer, you don't understand who you're dealing with. I'm the president of this HOA. I know the laws here. I know the codes. This fence was in violation long before tonight. I have the authority to report it. In fact, I should be the one writing him up, not you." Her words were poison, dripping into the night air. But the officer didn't move. His eyes stayed locked on her son. And then he finally spoke again. "I need you to step to the side, ma'am." Karen froze. The power she wore like armor cracked again. Her son swallowed hard, his eyes darting between us. And I stood silent, my fists clenched, my breath caught in my throat. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about a broken fence or a drunk kid. This was about the one person who had ruled over us for years, the one person everyone feared, finally facing a truth she couldn't bend to her will. The officer pulled out a small flashlight pen, shined it in her son's eyes. The boy flinched, blinking too slow, too heavy. The officer's face didn't change, but I could feel it. The verdict was already written. Karen tried one last time, her voice breaking now. "Please, officer, don't do this. He's a good boy. He's never been in trouble. This fence, it's the real problem. It's always been too close. It's dangerous. You can see that, can't you?" Her desperation filled the night. It was almost pitiful, almost. But I couldn't forget the years she had made my life hell. The fines, the threats, the humiliation. And now, to watch her beg, to see the cracks in her mask. It was like the air finally cleared after a storm. The officer stepped back, speaking into his radio again, his words low, but sharp. Karen's shoulders tensed, her son's eyes widened. And I knew exactly what was coming. A tow truck, the sound of chains rattling through the night, the end of the smirk, the end of the lies, but also the beginning of something else. Because I knew Karen wouldn't forget this. She wouldn't forgive it. And if she couldn't bend the officer to her will, she would come after me. The boy's voice cracked suddenly, trembling with panic. "Mom, do something." Karen turned to him, her hand reaching out. But for the first time, she had nothing to give. No power, no rule, no way out. Just silence. The neighbors' curtains shifted again. I could feel their eyes on us, watching the queen of the HOA lose her crown, watching the son who thought he was untouchable, about to face the weight of reality, and watching me, the man who had kept quiet for too long, finally stand still against the storm. The officer's flashlight turned to me. "Sir, I'll need a statement from you as well." Karen's head snapped toward me, her eyes burning with a hatred so sharp I could feel it on my skin. Her lips curled, not in a smile this time, but in a silent promise. This wasn't over. And in that silence, in that glow of red and blue lights, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The war wasn't ending. It was only beginning. So I'll ask you this. If you were standing there, watching the most powerful woman in the neighborhood break in front of everyone, would you feel pity for her, or satisfaction that karma had finally come knocking at her door? The night should have ended with the sound of chains pulling that car away. But it didn't, because Karen wasn't built to lose, and she wasn't ready to let the story end with her son looking guilty and me standing there untouched. The officer was still busy with his radio when she turned to me, her face glowing red under the flashing lights, her lips tight, her eyes burning. And in a low voice only I could hear, she whispered, "You think this is over. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Her words slid through me like ice, not shouted, not screamed, but whispered. A promise, a warning, maybe even a threat. I said nothing, but in my silence, I could feel her anger grow, like a fire pressed under glass, waiting for air. Her son leaned against the car, his head down, his body shaking slightly. The smell of alcohol hung heavy around him. He wasn't smirking anymore. He wasn't laughing. He looked small now, like the spoiled prince had been stripped of his crown. But Karen, she refused to let the kingdom fall. The officer stepped closer again, giving me a clipboard. "Sir, write down what happened. Everything you saw." My hand gripped the pen tight. The paper felt heavy in my palm, because I knew the words I put down would either build a wall of truth or dig me deeper into Karen's war. I began writing. The crash, the broken wood, the smell of alcohol. My words flowed steady, clear. And when I handed the paper back, the officer nodded once, silent but sure. Karen watched me, her jaw tight, her arms crossed so hard her knuckles went white. She looked at me like I had just betrayed her personally, like I had broken her fence instead of the other way around. And that's when the tow truck arrived. The sound of the engine rumbled down the street. Chains clanking, gears grinding. Every neighbor who hadn't already been watching came to their windows now. The Queen's humiliation had an audience, and she knew it. The truck backed into my yard, its lights cutting across the crushed flowers, the shattered fence. The driver jumped out, quick, professional. He didn't even look at Karen. He just got to work, hooking the chains to the car. Karen snapped. She stepped forward fast, her voice sharp like knives. "You can't take this car. This is harassment. This is illegal. You don't have the authority to—" The officer cut her off. Calm, steady. "Ma'am, step back." But Karen didn't move. She grabbed the car door, pulling it open, like she could protect the vehicle with her bare hands. Her son groaned, covering his face with both palms. And the neighbors. Oh, the neighbors. I could almost hear their silent laughter from behind the glass, because for years Karen had ruled them with fines and threats, and tonight they finally saw her lose. The tow truck driver didn't slow down. The chains pulled tight, the car groaned, metal scraping against the ground. Karen screamed, her voice cracking in the night air. "Stop! You don't know what you're doing! This isn't fair!" But nothing stopped. The car lifted slowly, its weight surrendering to the chains. And with it, Karen's pride lifted too. Every inch it rose. Her mask slipped further, until finally, she was no longer the queen of the HOA. She was just a mother, desperate, angry, powerless. The car settled on the truck bed with a heavy thud. Karen stood frozen, her chest rising and falling fast. Her son leaned against the fence post, silent, pale, defeated. And me, I stood still, the night air cool against my skin. For once, I felt free. But I knew freedom was dangerous, because when someone like Karen loses in public, they don't forgive. They plot, they wait, they come back harder than before. The tow truck rumbled away. Its red lights faded into the dark. The officer spoke a few final words, calm and official, before walking back to his car. And just like that, it was over. Or at least, it looked like it was. The street fell quiet again. Neighbors shut their curtains. Lights clicked off. The perfect silence of suburbia returned. But beneath it, I could still feel the pulse of something darker, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for what came next. Karen turned to me, her eyes sharp, her voice low. "You'll regret this." Just 3 words, but heavy enough to sink into my chest like stones. And I believed her, because I had seen what she could do with nothing more than a pen and paper. Letters that turned into fines, fines that turned into lawsuits, lawsuits that broke families apart. And now, she had a reason to use it all against me. I went back inside, closed the door, locked it tight. But I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, staring at the shattered remains of my fence, the smell of splintered wood still in the air, and the echo of Karen's words still in my ears. Because fences can be rebuilt, flowers can be replanted. But once a war begins with the HOA, it doesn't end with broken wood. It ends with something much worse. And as the hours crawled by, I kept asking myself, when the sun rises tomorrow, will she come at me with rules? Or with revenge? Silence can be louder than screaming. And after that night, silence was all I heard. No police radios, no tow truck chains, no neighbors whispering behind glass. Just the stillness of a neighborhood pretending everything was normal. But I knew the real storm hadn't started yet. When I stepped outside the next morning, the air felt heavy. The fence still broken, the ground littered with splinters and crushed flowers. But there was something else. A piece of paper tucked under my front doormat. I bent down slowly, unfolded it with cautious fingers. It was official HOA stationery. Stamped, signed, and already filled with fines. Violation, broken fence, front yard disorder, unsafe landscaping. Fine, $250. Deadline, immediate. I almost laughed. Almost. Because it was so quick, so predictable. Karen wasted no time. Her son had wrecked my property. But I was the one fined for damages caused by his wreck. It was the first shot of her new war, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. The neighbors passed me quietly that morning. Some glanced at me, pity in their eyes. Some avoided me altogether, pretending they hadn't seen anything the night before. Fear, that's what it was. Fear of Karen. Fear of what she could do to them if they stepped out of line. By noon, there was another letter. By evening, 2 more. One for juror, ass height exceeding regulation. Another for unapproved damage repair. And the last was so absurd I read it twice, just to believe it. Excessive noise complaint. Possible disturbance of neighborhood peace. Noise? The only sound had been Karen's son crashing through my fence at midnight, but the paper made it sound like I'd hosted a rock concert on my lawn. I felt my chest tighten. Not from fear. Not yet. But from anger. Pure, burning, unshakable anger. Every time I looked at the broken fence, I saw her smile behind it. Every letter wasn't just a notice. It was a reminder that she controlled this place, that she could bury me in paper and fines until I broke. I sat at my kitchen table that night, a pile of envelopes in front of me, their sharp corners digging into my palms. And I asked myself, what's worse? A car smashing into your yard? Or a neighbor who won't stop until she's destroyed you? The days blurred into each other after that. Every morning, another notice. Every evening, another letter slipped under my door. Karen didn't need to scream anymore. Her weapon was silence, paperwork. Rules bent so far they became knives. And the strange thing was, the neighborhood stayed quiet about it. No one asked me questions. No one offered help. It was like I had become untouchable, poisoned by Karen's war. And they were all too scared to stand near me. But then, one night, something happened that made me realize this wasn't just about paperwork anymore. I woke up around 2 a.m., a faint sound pulling me out of sleep. It wasn't loud, just a shuffle, a faint crunch outside my window. I sat up slowly, my heart racing. The curtain swayed with the draft from the half-open window, and through the gap, I saw a shadow. Someone was standing near the broken fence, not moving, just standing there, watching. I froze. my breath shallow, my fingers gripping the edge of the bed. The figure didn't step closer, didn't turn away. They just lingered, a silhouette against the weak glow of the streetlight. And then, as if feeling my eyes on them, the figure moved back, melted into the night, gone. I sat there trembling, the silence louder than ever. And when morning came, waiting at my door was not one, not two, but 5 letters, each one more absurd than the last. Unapproved outdoor lighting. Suspicious activity after dark. Potential hazard due to unsecured fence. Every line dripped with malice. And I realized Karen wasn't just fighting me through paper. She was watching me. Every movement, every breath, every flicker of light inside my home. She wanted me to know she could see me, that this war wasn't limited to fines and rules anymore. And the worst part? The HOA system gave her the power to make it real, to write down lies and turn them into debts, to twist rules until even my silence became a crime. I looked at the broken fence again that evening, and for the first time since that night, I wondered if fixing it would even matter, because this wasn't about a fence anymore. It was about control. And she wasn't letting go until I gave her what she wanted. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. So I ask you, what would you do if your own neighbor had the power to ruin your life with nothing but a pen and a whisper? And they had already promised to make you regret standing up to them. Fear can creep in quietly, not with loud footsteps, but with the hum of silence that feels wrong. That's how the next few nights felt in my house. Wrong. I started noticing little things. The porch light that I knew I left on suddenly switched off. The trash bins dragged into the middle of the driveway. Small, strange things that felt harmless at first, until they didn't. Because then it wasn't just lights and trash. It was the sound of footsteps outside my window again. Slow, deliberate, like someone wanted me to know they were there. One night, I woke up to the sharp crack of glass. I stumbled into the kitchen, my heart racing, only to find a rock lying on the floor. My back window cracked, splinters of glass glinting under the moonlight. And taped to that rock was another letter. No envelope this time, just a single line scribbled across the paper. Fix your fence, or else. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't official HOA language. It wasn't even signed. It was personal. And that made it 10 times more dangerous. The next morning I tried to report it, called the local station, explained what happened, but the officer on the phone sighed like he'd heard it all before. "Do you have proof it was her?" he asked. Proof. How do you prove shadows in the night? I hung up, frustrated, staring at the cracked window like it was a wound I couldn't stitch shut. And that's when the pounding started. Not on the glass, on my front door. I opened it, my chest tight, and found 3 HOA board members standing there. Karen wasn't with them, but her fingerprints were all over their stiff smiles. "Mr. Davis," the tallest one said, "we've received multiple complaints regarding disturbances at your property." Disturbances. I almost laughed. The only disturbance was Karen and her son. They handed me another notice, their voices flat, rehearsed. Failure to maintain safe property. Continued violations may result in legal action and possible lien. A lien. They were threatening to take my home now. I clenched the paper in my fist, my knuckles white, and I saw it in their eyes. Fear. Even they were scared. Scared of her. Scared of crossing her. scared of saying her name out loud. When they walked away, I stood there on my porch, the broken fence behind me, the broken window at my side, and I realized Karen wasn't just fighting me with letters anymore. She was building a case to erase me completely. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak in the floorboards made my heart jump. Every car that slowed near my house made me stiffen in the dark. And then, at exactly 3 a.m., I heard it. A faint, metallic scrape, like someone dragging something across the side of my house. I grabbed a flashlight, my hands trembling, and swung open the back door. The beam cut through the yard, slicing across the broken fence, the crushed grass, the shadows. And there she was. Karen. Standing just beyond the fence line. Her arms crossed, her face calm. Too calm. Like she'd been waiting for me. Our eyes locked, the silence stretching so tight it felt like the air might snap. And then she smiled. Not a warm smile, not a human smile. A smile that told me everything I needed to know. She wanted me broken. She wanted me gone. Before I could even speak, she turned and disappeared into the night. No words, no sound. Just the soft crunch of gravel under her shoes. The next morning, another notice, this time taped directly to my broken fence. Final warning, non-compliance will not be tolerated. I held that paper in my hands, my chest burning, my mind spinning. Final warning. What came after final? And then I realized she wasn't going to stop until she had taken everything from me. So I ask you, if you knew your neighbor stood outside your home in the middle of the night smiling like a shadow with power over every piece of your life, would you fight back or would you run before they destroyed you completely? Some battles end with noise, but the deadliest ones end with silence. And after that night, after Karen stood outside my house smiling in the dark, I knew silence was her weapon, and it was slowly killing me. But silence can also be a shield, if you learn how to use it. I spent days pretending to break. I paid no mind to the endless notices stuffed in my mailbox. I let my lawn grow, let the broken fence lean, let the cracks in my windows stay. I let her think she was winning. And the neighborhood watched me. The man who used to nod at neighbors now walked past them with hollow eyes. The man who once fixed fences now left splinters to rot on the grass. I let them see me crumble, because I wanted Karen to feel safe. Safe enough to make one mistake. It came faster than I expected. One morning I received not just one letter, but a full packet. Pages stapled, highlighted, underlined in red ink, a full HOA violation report. Every rule she claimed I had broken, every complaint the board had filed against me, dozens of charges, thousands of dollars in fines, and at the bottom, her signature. She didn't even try to hide it. It was her name, her power, her arrogance, and it was exactly what I needed. That night I sat at my table with a stack of papers, and I began to prepare. See, Karen believed she knew the rules better than anyone, but she forgot one thing. Rules work both ways. I spent hours digging through bylaws, pulling up old emails, scanning minutes from meetings she had signed, every line, every comma, every word, and there it was, buried deep in the fine print. Board members found guilty of harassment or fraudulent enforcement shall be subject to removal by majority vote. Harassment, fraudulent enforcement, 2 words, and she was finished. But I couldn't just accuse her. No, I needed proof, and Karen had already given it to me. The rock through my window with the note taped on, the packet of violations signed in her own hand, the witnesses who saw her son crash into my fence, and most of all, the quiet neighbors who had stayed silent out of fear. Because silence breaks when fear finally turns to anger. I went door to door, not begging, not pleading, just showing them the truth, the notices, the damage, the rules she had bent until they snapped. Some closed the door on me, but others nodded slowly, their eyes finally opening. They had letters too. They had fines too. They had stories of Karen standing in the dark outside their homes. And together, we had more than fear now. We had numbers. The HOA board meeting was supposed to be quiet, ordinary. But that night the room was packed. Neighbors filled every seat, their faces pale but determined. Karen sat at the head of the table, her smile sharp, her voice dripping with control. "Mr. Davis," she said, "you have failed to comply with repeated notices. This board will now move to place a lien on your property." I stood up slowly, held the packet of papers high, and let my voice cut through the silence. "No, this board will move to remove you." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's smile faltered for the first time, and I laid it all out. The notes, the fines, the threats, the witnesses, the rules she herself had broken. Every piece of evidence stacked like bricks until her wall of power finally crumbled. She tried to interrupt, her voice rising, her face red. But the neighbors who once cowered under her glare now spoke up. One by one, voices shaking at first, but growing stronger. Yes, she fined me for the color of my curtains. She threatened to tow my car for parking in my own driveway. She stood outside my house at night, too. And when the vote was called, eyes all around the room, all but hers. Karen was out. Her face twisted, her smile gone, her power stripped away in the one place she thought she was untouchable. And I stood there, the broken man who had lost a fence, but won a war. The weeks after were quiet again. But this time, it was a different kind of silence. No papers under my door, no shadows in the night, no threats tucked into envelopes. The fence was repaired. The neighbors smiled again, and the street felt lighter, freer, like we had all woken from the same nightmare. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about her. I think about that smile she gave me outside my fence, the kind of smile that doesn't vanish just because the rules do. Because power doesn't die easily, it waits. And somewhere out there, I know Karen is waiting too. So tell me, if Karen ever came back, stronger, smarter, and even more dangerous, would you stand with me again? Or would you let the neighborhood fall back into silence?